I am Ramses II, the pharaoh whose name is known even to those who know nothing else. I walked this earth as a god among men, and people pretended it was normal. I built temples that have survived thousands of years, defeated enemies who thought they could fight, and left so many children that geneticists are still busy today. If you thought you already knew all the rulers, then you haven't heard my story. Welcome. We begin where legend is born. In the land of the pharaohs, the throne is not a gift. It's a test you must survive. As the son of the great king Seti I, I grew up in a palace where even the wind had orders. Do not touch the pharaoh's heir without permission. But believe me, even the children of the gods don't always have an easy childhood. Every step I took was watched by the eyes of teachers, priests, and generals. If I made a mistake, they all wrote it down. Little Ramses, he'll be smarter next time. And I was. Because Pharaoh is not forgiven for mistakes. They just go down in history as victories. I learned to read hieroglyphics before I could hold a sword properly. I learned to rule before I was old enough. And when I first picked up a gun, they told me, this is not a game. This is Egypt. But I didn't laugh. Because I knew even then I wasn't born to play. I was born to rule. Every day I was taught combat, strategy, history, faith, and most importantly, that a pharaoh never walks alone. He is followed by the people, the army, the gods, and a responsibility heavier than a pyramid. And I knew from my first breath, one day I would be pharaoh, and when that day comes, Egypt will know it. My father, Pharaoh Seti I, was a man who ruled with a firm hand and an even firmer gaze. It was said of him that when he entered a room, the statues stopped looking stony for a moment. I was a boy who had one good fortune and one problem. I was his son. My father didn't spare me. He taught me to lead soldiers, even though I was smaller than their shields. He taught me to make decisions, even when I didn't understand all the consequences. And above all, he taught me that a pharaoh must never show fear. Because when Pharaoh is afraid, Egypt is afraid. I stood beside him every day in audience, listening to the judgments, the demands, the plans. And then came my first battles. They let me ride with the army to the borders of the country. Not for blood, for courage. I was barely a young man when they put a sword in my hand, heavier than some decisions that I would one day make. I saw the forts, the soldiers, the training, and I understood one thing. To rule is to protect, and to protect is to be prepared to fight and to die. That's when I first met a woman who became the light of my life, Nefertari. Smart, beautiful, brave. She didn't even bow down to me. And that was exactly what I needed. In her eyes I saw Egypt, not the one on maps and stele, but one worth living for and dying for. And one day my father took me to the roof of the palace, pointed to the horizon and said, "One day it will all be on your shoulders, son, so learn to carry the world without stopping." At that moment, I understood, I'm not just an heir anymore, I am the future pharaoh, and the past and future of Egypt was already beginning to write my name. When my father Seti died, the earth stopped breathing, but I couldn't afford to lose my breath. The pharaoh does not rest. Pharaoh is taking over the world. I was young, and everyone knew it. The commanders tested me, the priests tested me, and the courtiers smiled more than was safe. But I had one big advantage. They didn't underestimate me long enough. My first days on the throne, they told me what I should do, who to give way to, who to fear, and I let them talk. Because when enemies speak, they don't know they've already lost. I started with the most important thing, Egypt itself. Trade routes have opened up, the granaries filled with grain, ships were leaving the ports. I didn't want Egypt to survive. I wanted it to flourish. People wanted jobs, and I gave it to them. Buildings, temples, fortresses, every stone had a purpose. The high priest asked me, "Do you want to be just a pharaoh or a god?" I smiled and answered, "And what prevents you from being both?" The gods were invisible. I was their voice, and people trusted that voice more than ever. The drums echoed in the north. The Hittites watched to see if the young king would falter. I wanted to show them that youth is not a weakness. It's the speed of the blow. I felt the real test was coming, that my name would be written not in ink, but in fire and blood. Every night I stood on the terrace of the palace, looking in the direction where Kadesh lay, and whisper in my mind, "When I get there, you will know the Great One." My generals said to keep my head down. I answered them, "A pharaoh who sticks to the ground is not worthy to touch the stars." So I raised my sword, I put on the crown, and Egypt breathed with me. For on the day that Ramesses rises, the world will learn the difference between a ruler and a legend. They said the Hittites were just distant neighbours. I said they were too close. The city of Kadesh was on the border of empires, like a gateway, and whoever holds the gate decides who enters. My generals thought they could dissuade me with words of risk. They didn't know that risk was my favourite toy. I led 4 huge army divisions, Ra, Amun, Ptah, and Sutesh, each strong enough to take the city on its own. But I sent them ahead, because victory looks so much better when you have witnesses. I reached the city of Kadesh first, Ramses himself at the head of the Amun division. Confidence? No. Simple fact. The messengers said the Hittites were fleeing. I laughed. Sometimes a lie is so stupid, it's dangerous. But I confess, I made a mistake then. The Hittite army was hidden behind hills, thousands of chariots, and all of them aimed at me. Suddenly, thunder, not from the sky, but from the chariot wheel that came like a storm. My camp turned into hell, soldiers falling, tents collapsing. The dust scratched our throats like fear. For a moment, I saw death, cold, silent, waiting. And I laughed at it. Because when Pharaoh is afraid, everyone is afraid. And when Pharaoh rises up, the whole empire rises. I jumped on my chariot and rushed straight at the enemy. Against the whole army. Yes, myself at the head. The gods were there. I could feel them in every blow. I'm Ray's son, you know. Gradually, more of my troops arrived, and the city of Kadesh ceased to belong to death. And it began to belong to me. The battle went like this, as the vast majority of battles in history have. Everyone said he won, but only one had victory carved into temples throughout Egypt. And that one, it's me. My scribes wrote, Ramses saved Egypt with his own hands, alone. And who would have the courage to say otherwise? I have come to understand that victory is a beautiful thing, but peace is much more practical. And so I decided to act. The Battle of Kadesh was bloody, but it was, above all, the beginning, not the end. because now it wasn't just a war, the diplomacy of Pharaoh was being written. They say the Pharaoh has many wives, but Pharaoh loves only one. And I loved Nefertari. She was my first wife, and the first joy of every day. She had eyes that reflected the sun over Nile and a voice that could soothe my anger. When I sat on the throne, she sat beside me, not under it. She was beautiful, but I loved her because she was wise. She could say things that others couldn't even think of, sometimes gently, sometimes so sharply it would make a dagger shy. She told me, "Ramesses, a pharaoh can have thousands of soldiers, but only one truth." And I laughed because she was always right, even if I didn't want to admit it. Until later. I've had enough of other women. Well, okay, a lot. And so many kids you wouldn't want to count them. But Nefertari was unique. It wasn't that the others were less, she was just more. When I came back from the war, I didn't want praise or accolades. I wanted to see her smile. So I built her a temple. Not just any temple, a temple in Abu Simbel. At its heart stands her statue, as tall as mine. And you know why? Because if you love the queen, you don't stand her at your feet. You put her by your side. They say Egypt taught me how to rule, but Nefertari taught me to be human. And so, when the day came, when her heart stopped, it was a single moment I ever felt that Egypt stopped too. I built her a tomb full of stars in the Valley of the Queens, and I wrote on its walls, "For her for whom the sun shines," because she was the light that guided me, even in the shadows. They say what you leave behind will determine whether you live after you die. So I decided to live forever. I have already raised Egypt in battle. Now it was time to raise it up in stone and sunlight. At the border of the empire, where the desert meets the Nile, I had a temple carved so huge that even the mountains had to stand on tiptoe. 4 giant statues at the entrance, yes, all by me. And I was still humble. Inside, I had a shrine built for Nefertari, because if you love the queen, you don't let her stand in the shadows, not even your own. They said a pharaoh shouldn't build temples about himself. I looked at them and said, then don't look. I built Ramesseum, a temple where you could feel the pride of Egypt in every stone. If I could, it would be even bigger. But even the sun has its limits. I expanded Karnak, the temple where the priests speak, so softly to the gods that only they can hear. And I connected it to Luxor, so that faith can walk the same path as men. Obelisks, columns, statues, so high that even the sun had to rise to reach them. People said I was exaggerating. I said, look around. You still go up there to look, don't you? I wasn't just consecrating a stone. I built canals, roads, forts. The Nile was my ally, but I gave him what he needed. Order. When you have a people who work and a river that feeds, you get an empire that lasts. Some have claimed that I am trying to outdo all the pharaohs before me. I smiled and said, I will not overtake them. I'm just building higher. I've built so much that even if the dirt turned to dust and the sand to wind, my name will not disappear. Because building is not laying stones. To build is to leave a mark, and mine will be read by Egypt long afterwards, after the gods remember that I am, in fact, one of them. Pharaoh's power is measured in stone. And children. And I had plenty of both. Nefertari, my heart, the first queen, my son. You've heard of her, the one I believed in, that even a pharaoh could have a heart, and not lose his crown. Then there was Iset Nofret. She didn't need to stand in the light to have a solid shadow. Wise, calm, true to Egypt. If she were a temple, it would have had a foundation deeper than the Nile. And then, children. Experts say there were about 100 of them, maybe more. Who's counting when you're building an empire? I've had princes and princesses who were my courage and my future. Some fought by my side. Others ruled cities. They all carried my name in their blood, and that blood was pure Egypt. When we held the feast, the lines of my descendants were so long that people thought they could see the whole army in front of them. Yes, they did. People said I was enjoying life too much, and I told them, when you've ruled for 66 years, you must have hobbies. My sons and daughters were like stars in the sky. Sometimes I couldn't keep track of them all, but I knew they were shining for Egypt, and that was more important to me than all the gossip that got lost in the sands of time. Any conqueror can fight, but to keep the peace, only a ruler can make peace. The Battle of Kadesh, yes, it was stormy. Yes, I survived it with a smile. And yes, I had my courage sculpted on so many steles that it must have hurt Hittites more than our spears. But then, both empires realized it was better to shake hands than to hold a gun forever. We met as equals, no bowing, no chains. We made a deal. Egypt and the Hittites will not fight as long as Ramses sits on the throne. And if any of us are threatened, the other will come to the rescue. The first international peace treaty in history. And guess whose name is the biggest on it? Yes, it's no coincidence. It's still on display at the UN today, so when the world learns about peace, they learn from me. I told you, I'm a legend. War will make you famous. Peace will keep you in memory. To fight only to win is weakness. To fight so you don't have to fight anymore, that is the wisdom of Pharaoh. And I said to myself, Egypt deserves peace, so it can grow as high as my obelisks. So I did what no ruler had ever done before. I turned an enemy into an ally, and my empire blossomed. The fields were full of people, granaries full of grain, and palaces full of joy. I ruled Egypt by force, but I ruled it with reason. And when people asked me how I had tamed the Hittites, I answered simply, sometimes you just have to stop screaming and start talking. Many kings manage to rule for a year or two. Only a few can rule for 10 years. But me, I have ruled for over 66 years. So long that people no longer remember a world where I wasn't Pharaoh. I've seen generations grow up. I've seen my sons grow old. And some have died before me. When I saw my reflection, my face was older, my eyes deeper. But power, it was still the same. The corridors of the palace knew me by heart. Each column carried a shadow of my past. Each torch the light of my legacy. The priests said I was divine. The people said I was eternal. And I didn't try to prove otherwise. I have had pains that even the gods can envy. Bones crunched like old papyrus. My teeth were more in the paint than in my mouth. But when I picked up the scepter, the world knelt again. I sat on the throne and listened to the voices of Egypt. Some quiet, pleading, hopeful, others loud, confident, ready to shape the future. And I heard them all, always. Every new day I asked myself, what mark will I leave today? Because even if you live a long life, life only has meaning if every day is worth remembering. They said I refused to give up the throne. But I knew that once I left, Egypt would have to be prepared to lose a piece of its heart, and I wanted to give them a little more time to learn that even a legend closes its eyes one day. I've lived enough lives to give another 3. And yet one day, I felt a weight that is not of stone or throne, but from time itself. My body was no longer ready to fight. The heart that had carried Egypt for ages grew weary. And when the last day came, I did not see it as the end. Rather, I saw it as a gate that I must open myself, like all the others. I lay surrounded by my people. I heard the prayers I myself had once taught. And when I breathed my last, I knew that Egypt would go on. Because I was Egypt, and Egypt was in me. The priests prepared my body according to the most ancient rituals. They wrapped me in linen, rubbed me with scented oils, and put them together with the treasures to accompany me in the realm of the dead. They built my tomb in the Valley of the Kings, dark corridors full of mystery, silence and stars tinged with gold. A place where gods and rulers meet when their journeys on earth end. But those who thought my journey ended here were mistaken. Because when archaeologists found my body thousands of years later, it wasn't a body that lay before them. It was evidence, proof that I had lived so strongly that even death dared not hide me. My mummy rests in the museum today, under the protection of the light that never left me. And people come from all over the world to see the pharaoh who refused to let himself be forgotten. Yes, time has taken my blood, my children, my empire, but it couldn't take my name. And when someone says Ramses the Great today, they hear more than history. They hear the echo of courage, an echo of strength, the echo of a man who stood among the stars and said to them, "Make way. I'm coming." If you want to see me again, which of course you do, click subscribe, like. They say he who supports the pharaoh is lucky for life. Coincidence? I don't think so. The past whispers, the future listens.